They arrived just before sunset with nothing but a duffel bag, 2 suitcases, and the kind of joy that lives only in the hearts of people moments away from forever. Mia had chosen the beach house tucked quietly between dunes, miles from the nearest town, not for its size or luxury but because of the stories it seemed to whisper through salt-worn wood and sea breeze. Daniel, as always, let her lead. He trusted her instincts more than his own. That trust had never failed him. Until now. The house creaked with age as they stepped inside, each footstep echoing against forgotten walls. Dust danced through golden rays pouring in from the large ocean-facing windows. Mia laughed, a light, melodic sound brushing off a cobweb from the corner of a window pane. "It's perfect," she whispered. "No one around, just us. No phones. No internet. Just us and the sea." Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind and buried his face in her neck. She smelled of sun and oranges. "Finally alone," he murmured. "After all this madness. Engagement parties. Work obligations. Family drama." Mia's mother wasn't thrilled about Daniel. His father thought Mia was too artistic, too free. But none of that mattered here. Here, the waves would crash in time with their heartbeat and the stars would shine only for them. That first night was filled with music from a portable speaker, cheap wine, and tangled laughter. Mia danced barefoot on the wooden deck, hair blowing wildly in the wind as Daniel filmed her with his old DSLR, saying she looked like something out of a dream. She was barefoot, wearing only his oversized shirt, spinning slowly while the sea hummed in the background. "You better keep that video safe," she warned. "Proof that I'm fun when I'm old and bitter." He never uploaded the video. Not to the cloud, not to a drive. Just kept it on the camera. And after that night, no one ever saw it again. On the second day, they explored the rocks near the tide pools, collecting shells, chasing small crabs, and trying to cook mussels they had no idea how to prepare. They got sunburnt. They kissed. They scribbled future baby names in the sand and let the ocean wash them away, laughing at how terrible they were at picking names that didn't sound like cartoon characters. That evening, a storm rolled in, unannounced, sudden, and electric. Mia stood out on the porch, watching the sky bruise purple and gray, rain beginning to slice sideways across the shore. Daniel told her to come inside, but she didn't move. "I like watching the chaos," she said, voice distant. "Makes everything else feel small." That night, their last night, Mia didn't sleep. Or if she did, she slipped in and out of it, murmuring things Daniel couldn't quite understand. Around 3 a.m., he found her in the kitchen, barefoot again, staring into nothing. She didn't speak when he asked if everything was okay. Just blinked and said, "I think we're being watched." He laughed nervously, but the house felt colder than it should have been. By morning, the storm had passed. The air smelled of wet pine and salt. The birds returned to their calls. But Mia and Daniel did not return to town. When the rental agency arrived 2 days later to prepare the house for the next guests, they found the door unlocked, the car still in the drive, their belongings still inside. Clothes folded in drawers. Mia's sketchbook open on the kitchen counter with half-drawn faces that looked eerily unfamiliar. Daniel's toothbrush damp. 2 coffee cups in the sink. One half full. But no sign of them. Not in the house. Not on the beach. Not even footprints in the sand. Authorities were called. A search was launched. Helicopters, drones, volunteer divers. Nothing. The ocean kept its silence. The dunes stood still. No signs of struggle. No break-ins. No screams. No blood. Only that open door. Only that coffee cup. Their families were wrecked. Mia's mother held candlelit vigils every month for the first year. Daniel's father blamed himself and built a shed in the backyard, locking himself away with the guilt. The media ran stories for weeks. A few YouTubers made documentary-style content, speculating everything from abduction to cults to a double suicide pact. The town where the beach house stood refused to talk to reporters. They had seen strange things before. They didn't need cameras digging up old dirt. 5 years passed. The beach house, abandoned, fell deeper into decay. Moss crept up its walls. Windows cracked. The sea pushed closer each year. Until, one blistering August morning, just a few miles offshore, a diver named Ellis Creed, a thrill-seeker turned YouTuber with a GoPro strapped to his mask, dove beneath a reef known locally as Devil's Collar. A jagged formation that had claimed many boat bottoms but offered rare coral footage. He was nearly 30 feet down when he saw it. Something glinting, something unnatural. He angled closer, kicking slowly, heart starting to pound. It was wedged between the reef and a collapsed piece of rusted metal that looked like part of a boat or storage locker. Not large, not obvious, but unmistakably human-made. And when he pried it loose and rose to the surface, heart racing, lungs burning, he realized what he was holding in his hand. It was a ring, an engagement ring, the same design Daniel had posted on his Instagram just 6 days before they vanished. Custom-made, rose gold, engraved on the inside with the words, "Still, always." Ellis Creed went viral. But what he didn't tell his audience, what he saved for the police, was that the ring was still attached to something. A strand of hair, human, tangled around the band. And underneath the metal plating of the reef, just inches deeper into the crevice, something else shimmered in the shadows. Something shaped like a jaw. The house hadn't changed much in 5 years. At least not from the outside. The siding, once whitewashed and charmingly chipped, was now sun-bleached and speckled with green mold. The porch sagged a little more. Wind had torn off 2 shutters. Ivy crept up along one side like a lazy trespasser. But it was still there, still waiting, as if frozen in the last moment before it let them disappear. The real estate company hadn't bothered to relist it. Too many rumors. Too much baggage. No amount of repainting could silence the whispers that came with it. A young engaged couple. Gone. Without a trace. Detective Ronan Blake had worked the case when it first broke. He had since retired, traded long hours and cold cases for fishing and coffee on his porch in Charleston. He'd told himself he'd moved on. But when the call came from a junior officer named Callie Reeds, the one who'd taken over many of his old cases, he didn't even hesitate. The ring had surfaced. 5 years later. And with it, the question that had haunted him more than he ever admitted to his wife. Where did they go? Callie met him in front of the house, holding the key she'd signed out from evidence. "You're really coming in?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Thought you'd sworn this place off." "I thought it let me off," Ronan replied, eyes narrowing at the porch. "Guess I was wrong." Inside, the air smelled of old salt and decay. Dust covered everything, thick and undisturbed. The sofa where they'd last been seen sitting was still in place, sagging, cushions sunken. The kitchen table had an old ring stain on it from that final coffee cup. Ronan stepped into the hallway and let his fingers brush along the wall. Cold. Clammy. Callie was scanning the room with a handheld UV light, hoping for signs that had been missed. New tools, new eyes. Same empty answers. They combed the house room by room. Nothing had been touched. The fridge still had the same half-used mustard bottle and a carton of expired eggs. Mia's sketchbook remained open on the kitchen counter. Exactly how the original report had said. Ronan leaned over it. The last sketch was strange. A face, half-drawn, eyes too wide, mouth too small. Behind it, faint lines that looked like waves or long strands of hair, or maybe both. Mia was an artist, Callie said behind him. Apparently she'd been having nightmares the week before. Her mother mentioned something about it. She tell that to anyone back then? Nope, not until year 2. Said she thought no one would believe her. They stood in silence. Upstairs, the bedroom still smelled faintly of lavender and ocean. The bed was made. There was an old book on the nightstand with a dog-eared page. The Sea by Iris Murdoch. Mia had been reading it. Ronan thumbed through the pages, stopping at the bookmarked line. People go mad in idleness. Is what evil wants: silence, stillness. You go mad in it. He closed the book slowly. Callie opened the small wardrobe. Still clothes inside. A blue sundress with a stain at the hem. A pair of Daniel's cargo shorts. Nothing remarkable. Except, taped to the inside of the wardrobe wall was a Polaroid. Faded, water-damaged, but still visible. It showed the beach, the same deck, the view looking out to the ocean, and 2 shadows on the sand. Long, thin, too tall. But Daniel and Mia were never that tall. And whoever took this photo, no one remembered them bringing a Polaroid. Where was this during the original search? Callie whispered. Wasn't here, Ronan said immediately. That closet was empty. Photos went into evidence. No Polaroids were listed. So who came back and left this here? Ronan didn't answer. His jaw tightened. He took the photo and slid it into a bag from his coat pocket. Let's keep that between us for now. They went outside again. The wind had picked up. Seagulls circled overhead like vultures, pretending not to care. What do we know about Devil's Collar? He asked. Callie flipped open her phone. Reef system off the coast, dangerous for boats. Locals think it's cursed. Superstition mostly. But the diver Ellis, he found the ring wedged there. Said it was inside a piece of rusted storage metal. We pulled the piece up yesterday. Looks like the side of an old boat, but not one anyone's registered lost in the last decade. What else was in it? A bone fragment. Human. We're waiting on dental and DNA. Forensics say it's a jawbone. Upper, partial. Ronan's stomach turned. They weren't anywhere near that reef. If they were taken out there, someone moved them. Callie nodded. Or something dragged them. No signs of a struggle, he muttered. No blood, no vehicle traces, no signs they even left on foot. Right, she said. It's like they stepped into air and vanished. Ronan looked at the dunes, the waves lapping gently now, nothing threatening about them at all. Or the ocean swallowed them whole. He didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But the ring was real. The hair sample had been sent for comparison. And the jawbone, whatever story it held, was slowly being coaxed into speech by forensic scientists miles away. As they walked back to the patrol car, Callie paused, turning her head toward the edge of the woods behind the beach house. Do you hear that? Ronan stopped. Listened. It wasn't wind. Not bird calls. Not the ocean. A low humming sound. Faint. Like something electrical. Like a vibration just beneath the ground. Then silence. Callie stepped toward the trees, hand on her service weapon. But the sound was gone. Nothing moved between the trunks. No footprints. Just shadows. Probably nothing, she said, but her voice was brittle. Ronan didn't answer. He just looked back toward the house, its broken windows, its broken story. And wondered what it was still hiding. Because something had started. 5 years ago. And now it was starting again. The town of Driftwood Hollow wasn't on most maps. Just a dot on the coast. A place where lighthouses stood empty and crab shacks served more gossip than food. It had one diner, one sheriff, and too many secrets. People came here to disappear or to forget. Some said the wind never stopped howling at night because it was filled with voices from the past. But no one said that out loud. Not anymore. When Ronan and Callie rolled into town that morning, the streets looked the same as they had 5 years ago. Sun-bleached, sleepy, and guarded. Locals moved slowly, eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of an out-of-town car. No one waved. Ronan parked outside the only cafe in Driftwood Hollow, the Salt Spoon. It sat on the corner of Main and Harbor, flanked by a bait shop and a laundromat that hadn't worked properly since 1998. As he and Callie entered, a silver bell jingled above the door and a dozen heads turned at once like birds startled by a distant gunshot. The waitress, an older woman with sun-damaged skin and clouded blue eyes, froze mid-pour of coffee. Well, she muttered, look what the tide dragged in. Hello, Bess, Ronan said, removing his sunglasses. You still got that awful pie? She set the coffee pot down. You still poking at graves that don't want digging? Callie stepped up, badge glinting at her waist. We're reopening the case. Someone found something near Devil's Collar. The name landed like a weight in the room. A fork clattered to the floor. No one picked it up. Y'all really think there's something left to find? Bess asked, her voice thin now. People disappear. Happens all the time. Especially when they come poking into things that were never theirs to touch. They were just kids, Ronan replied. Engaged. Young. They didn't poke anything. Bess shook her head slowly. Not everything wrong out here gets done by human hands. The room was silent again. Ronan leaned in. You remember the night they vanished? I remember the storm, she said. Loudest we'd had in a decade. Lightning struck the old pier. Set fire to the bait shop roof. Whole sky lit up like it was screaming. Did anyone see them leave? No, she said. And no one will say if they did. Why? She met his eyes now, and for a moment her usual sarcasm was gone. Because something was here that week. Not just the storm. Not just them. It was wrong. In the air. People felt it. Some folks left town just to get away. Said it was like something watching. Like being measured. Callie glanced at Ronan. You never mentioned this in your report. Didn't know, he replied. No one talked then. They still shouldn't, Bess said sharply. You go stirring up the ocean's leftovers. Don't act surprised when it swallows you next. They left the cafe with more silence than answers. Outside, a teenager with a skateboard watched them from across the street, face half hidden by a hoodie. When they passed, he turned and walked in the opposite direction. Callie looked uneasy. Do you feel that? The town doesn't want us here, Ronan muttered. No, she said, voice lower. Not that. The way the wind sounds. It's wrong. Like it's moving backward. He hadn't noticed until now. The sea breeze was cool, but it didn't feel refreshing. It felt like a whisper on the neck. Like breath you couldn't see. They headed to the sheriff's office, an old brick building with peeling green shutters. Inside, Sheriff Garner leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the desk, chewing on a toothpick. You two bringing storms with you again? He asked without getting up. We're following a lead, Ronan said. Something real. I heard. Ring in a reef. Jawbone. Big stuff. You never believed they ran off, Callie said. Not really. No, Garner admitted. But I stopped asking questions when it got me sleepless nights. You don't stick around this town asking the ocean what it's hiding. You'll drown faster than you can scream. Ronan leaned on the desk. Who else was in town that weekend? Anyone strange? Outsiders. Garner hesitated. You got files, Callie said. We need them. He sighed and opened the bottom drawer. A manila folder, thin but heavy with implication, slid across the table. One guy rented a cabin near the beach house. No ID. Paid cash. Signed in as Dorian C. No last name. Stayed 3 nights. Disappeared the morning after the couple did. Ronan opened the folder. The rental log was crude, handwritten, dated. Dorian C. arrived 2 days before Mia and Daniel. No contact details. No forwarding address. Did anyone talk to him? Callie asked. No, Garner replied. But Bess swore she saw him standing outside the beach house on the second night. Said he wasn't moving. Just standing there. Watching the deck. They copied the file and left. On their way back, they passed the old chapel on the hill, the one with the boarded windows and the crooked steeple. A woman stood near the gate, hands clasped behind her back, looking straight at them. As they slowed down, she didn't blink. Her eyes were pale. Too pale. Almost translucent. She's been there every day this week, Callie said softly. Locals say she comes at dawn and leaves at dusk. Who is she? No one knows. Not on the town records. Doesn't talk. Just stands there. The woman lifted one hand slowly and pointed, not at them, but out toward the sea. Toward Devil's Collar. Then she turned and walked into the chapel. The doors closed behind her without a sound. Back at the beach house, the tide had risen. The sand near the deck was damp, darkened with water that had crept far too close. Something glinted in the wet earth, another shard of metal. Callie picked it up with gloves. Rusted. Thin. With tiny notches along one side. Like it had been broken off something larger. Or chewed. Ronan looked at the reef in the far distance, the jagged line barely visible in the foggy horizon. If that diver found the ring 5 years later, he said, how long has the rest of their story been trapped out there, waiting? Callie didn't answer. She was staring at something on the shard. Carved into the metal, barely visible beneath the rust, were 4 words. They are still listening. Ellis Creed hadn't slept since the dive. Not properly. He'd been on dozens of wrecked dives before, sunken ships, forgotten submarines, rusted fishing vessels entangled in seaweed, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt alive. He had gone down into Devil's Collar with excitement in his chest and a GoPro strapped to his mask, ready to find choral shots to impress his growing audience. He didn't expect the pressure to feel wrong, the temperature to shift suddenly halfway down, or the ringing in his ears that began when he reached the reef base. The ring was the first thing he saw, lodged between 2 rock ledges, glinting unnaturally under the silk-clouded light. At first, he thought it was trash, some piece of lost jewelry or maybe debris from a storm. But when he brushed away the sand and tugged it free, something moved. The metal screeched faintly like it didn't want to be let go. And when he surfaced, still gasping from the exertion, the air above the waves felt thicker, heavier. Back on land, Ellis examined it more closely. The ring had fine scratches, coral growth starting to form around its edges, but the engraving was still intact, still, always. He remembered the missing couple. Everyone did. Their story had been passed around like a ghost tale, especially among divers along the coast. A mystery that swallowed 2 people whole. And now the sea had given back a piece. But not without a warning. The hair had been tangled around the band, dark brown, long. And inside the metal crevice where he found it, something else had shimmered teeth. Just a fragment. A jagged curve of bone. He hadn't wanted to touch it. He'd taken a photo, sent it to the police, and let them handle the rest. But ever since, strange things had followed. His equipment glitched. His phone played muffled voices when unlocked. Every time he tried to sleep, he heard knocking. Underwater knocking. Like fists against glass. So when Detectives Blake and Reeds called asking for a return dive, Ellis hesitated only a second before saying yes. Because part of him needed to know what he had touched. What had touched back. They met at the docks before sunrise. The air was cool, the water black and rippling like liquid ink. No birds called. No boats moved. You sure about this? Callie asked as she handed him a fresh tank. I already opened the door, Ellis replied. Might as well walk through it. Ronan stayed above deck while Ellis and a secondary diver prepared. The boat hovered near the edge of Devil's Collar, the reef's jagged silhouette visible beneath the surface like the spine of some massive creature. As the divers sank below, the water swallowed them with unnatural silence. No fish. No motion. Just stillness. Ellis led the way. He remembered the route, the rocks that shaped the pathway like an arrow pointing towards something buried. The deeper they went, the darker the water became, not from depth alone, but from something pressing in. The flashlight beam began to flicker. Not fail, just flicker like it was being watched. Then he saw it again. The crevice. Only now it was wider. The metal plate he had pried the ring from was gone, pulled deeper, perhaps. Or moved. But something else had replaced it. A tangle of fabric almost like seaweed, but when he reached for it, it unfurled. It was part of a dress. Blue. Faded. Torn. Ellis froze. The second diver signaled a warning, but Ellis ignored it. He swam closer. The dress was caught between reef teeth, wrapped around something too rigid to be coral. As he pulled, bone slipped free, a hand. A ringless hand. Back on the boat, Ronan stared at the monitor connected to the underwater cam. The feed was static-laced but watchable. He saw Ellis reach into the rocks, saw the fabric lift, saw... The monitor went black. Ronan cursed and slammed the panel. Callie checked the receiver. We lost the feed. I'm on it, she said, scrambling toward the panel. Ellis felt the coldness spread as he retrieved the fragment of bone and cloth. His ears popped suddenly, painfully, and the weight of the water crushed in harder than before. Then a sound, no, a voice. It was faint. Garbled. But human. Not yet. He turned wildly, bubbles pouring from his mask. No one there. Just reef. Just bone. Just silence. He kicked upward, fast, dragging the evidence bag with him, bursting to the surface with a cry. The secondary diver surfaced seconds later, wide-eyed, silent. They said nothing as they climbed aboard. Ronan rushed to them. What happened down there? Ellis dropped the bag onto the deck. You need to get this tested. It's hers. I know it is. Callie opened it slowly. Inside was the dress scrap, tangled with algae and a finger bone. No skin. No tissue. But a faint trace of ink on the bone. A tattoo? No, a marking etched in tiny script. 3 numbers. 34.9. Ronan frowned. Coordinates? Maybe, Callie whispered. A depth reading? Ellis stepped back, shivering. That place isn't natural. Something down there waits. Watches. When I touched that dress, I heard a voice. It wasn't the water. It was behind it. Like it had been waiting for me. Ronan stared at the reef. The tide was higher than it should have been. Waves lapped at the boat like they were urging it closer. He didn't like it. They returned to shore just before nightfall. The lab would test the bone. The scrap would be analyzed. But something had changed. That night, Ronan sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the photo from the wardrobe again, the beach, the shadows, the 2 tall figures. He enlarged it. The figures weren't just tall. They were thin. Elongated. Wrong. And behind them, barely visible, a third shadow, shorter, bent, almost crouched. Watching them. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're not looking in the right place. Look deeper. 34.9 meters. But don't go alone. It waits. No name. No reply option. Just the message. Ronan stood, walked to the window, and looked toward the sea. The horizon was flat. Silent. But under the waves, something had moved. Something had waited. And now it was listening. The lab confirmed it 2 days later. The bone was human. Female. The DNA matched Mia's toothbrush from the original evidence files. The etching on the bone, 34.9, remained unexplained. Not a tattoo. Not a carving done by a knife or needle. It was fused into the bone's structure, almost branded into the molecular integrity itself. That's what the forensic report said. Like something had marked her. Claimed her. Ronan stood outside the forensics building, staring at the parking lot, barely breathing. He didn't call Callie. Not yet. He needed time to think. Time to not be a cop. Time to be just a man terrified of the patterns forming in the shadows of this case. The numbers weren't coordinates. They weren't a timestamp. He had seen something like this before on a case that was sealed, one he'd been warned never to discuss. He drove 3 hours inland to an address written in an old notebook, one he hadn't touched in years. The man he visited had been part of the Navy Intelligence Division, then retired quietly after a ship vanished in the Pacific without a trace. People called it a ghost ship. Officially, it never existed, but Ronan knew better. "Victor Niles," he said when the man answered the door. Victor, now in his 70s, with skin like leather and eyes too sharp for his age, just stared. "You should have burned that name out of your head, Blake. I need to talk to you." Victor didn't speak, just stepped aside and let him in. The house was plain. No pictures, no clocks, no noise. "There's a number," Ronan began, "etched into a human bone. -34.9. It came from a body recovered near Devil's Collar." Victor stopped pouring his coffee. He set the mug down without drinking. "You ever hear of Project Bellows?" Ronan shook his head. "Didn't think so. Blackwater-level secrecy. Mid-90s. Navy contracted with a private research group to study anomalous oceanic frequencies. Places where radio waves warped, where compasses spun. One of those places was just off your coast. Devil's Collar." Ronan's stomach twisted. What did they find? Not what, who, or maybe it's better to say when. Because those numbers you found? They match pressure depths where time stops making sense. -34.9 meters, to be exact. Below that depth, recordings go static. Divers report visions. Some hear music. Others hear screaming. Some never surface. "And what's that got to do with my case?" Victor leaned forward. "Do you know why the Navy stopped searching for that ship I was on?" "You said it vanished." "No," Victor said. "It came back, but no one on it did. And the equipment on board? All had timestamps from 5 years in the future." One of the crew's helmets had the word "always" scratched inside it. Ronan couldn't breathe. "The ring." Victor nodded slowly. "Whatever's in those waters doesn't kill you the way we understand death. It bends time, memory, self, maybe even pulls you across layers we're not meant to see." "I need to go back down there," Ronan muttered. Victor grabbed his wrist. "No. You go back down, it might not let you come back. That reef doesn't give up answers. It trades for them." But Ronan was already pulling away. Because now he needed answers more than air. Back in Driftwood Hollow, Callie had followed her own trail. She met with the teenager they'd seen on the street days ago, the one who had turned away too fast. His name was Liam. 15. Lived with his grandmother. But 5 years ago, he was 10 and he saw something no one believed. "I saw them that night," he whispered in the alley behind the laundromat. "Mia and Daniel. They were on the beach walking into the surf. But they weren't alone. Who else? A man. Or, I thought he was a man. But he was wrong. His arms were too long. His head was tilted like it didn't know how to hold itself up. And there was this sound. Like a heartbeat. But deep. Slow." Callie's pulse quickened. "You told anyone?" He shook his head. "Grandma told me to forget it. She said sometimes the sea wants people and when it wants them, nothing can stop it." "Did you see where they went?" Liam nodded slowly. "Into the water. But not swimming. They just kept walking. Like the ocean floor was a path. And then they disappeared." That night, Ronan and Callie met again. Neither told the other everything. But what they did share painted a picture neither wanted to look at. "There's something down there," she said. "Something ancient. Maybe alive. Maybe just watching." "I think we're part of the story now," Ronan said. "It's not about finding their bodies. It's about understanding what took them." They didn't sleep. They drove in silence. Back to the coast. Back to the edge of that ancient wound in the ocean. As they reached the overlook above Devil's Collar, the sea was unnaturally still. No breeze. No waves. Just one flat, endless sheet of black. "Look," Callie whispered. "Lights. Deep underwater. Like a pulse. Like something breathing." A boat engine rumbled behind them. Ellis Creed had returned. He saw the lights too. And he brought a deep-sea drone with him. "We're going down again," Ronan said. Ellis didn't argue. As the drone sank into the black, its screen showed little at first. Just murky water. Then coral. Then bone. Hundreds of pieces scattered like breadcrumbs. A trail. Then they saw it. A door. Metal. Ancient. Covered in barnacles and glyphs no one recognized. And on the center, etched in the same script found on Mia's bone, was a sentence. We trade memory for entry. The drone moved closer. Then the feed cut. Ellis cursed. Callie tried to restart it. But the signal was gone. And something floated to the surface, bumping gently against the side of the boat. Ronan reached over and lifted it. A shoe. Daniel's. Still soaked. Still dripping. And inside, something small and metallic. A charm. When he opened it, it played music. Just 2 notes. Repeating. The same notes that haunted Ellis's dreams. The sea had begun to whisper again. They had found something. Now it was deciding what it wanted in return. Ellis couldn't sleep again after the door. The image of it haunted every blink, burned into his mind like a brand. The symbols etched across its surface weren't just markings, they felt deliberate, communicative. He'd seen carvings underwater before, from old shipwrecks, cave systems, even forgotten cultures, but never anything that made him feel observed. Never anything that pulsed. 3 days had passed since the drone disappeared into the abyss, its signal severed the moment it approached the metallic door. Ronan had sent the video to a contact in marine archaeology. The contact had stopped replying after receiving the footage. No questions, no comments, just silence. Ronan took that silence as confirmation. They met again at the shoreline at sunrise, just before the light broke over the water. The waves were unusually calm, the tide resting in a kind of unnatural pause. Ronan, Callie, and Ellis stood together near the edge of the rocks, where Mia had once collected shells and laughed beneath a golden sky. Now, the air was heavy, thick with salt and something sour beneath it, like rusting iron and forgotten blood. "I'm going back down," Ellis said, strapping on his gear. Ronan gave a hard stare. "Alone. You can't bring a drone. And I don't trust tech anymore. Whatever's down there, it knew we were watching. It reached back. I felt it." Callie frowned. "What if it takes you?" Ellis clipped on the final strap of his tank and exhaled sharply. "Then I guess I'll be part of the story, too." The descent began smoothly. His flashlight cut through the water, scattering columns of drifting silt. He passed the jagged reef teeth, the coral that glowed slightly even without sunlight, and the bones, those scattered like a trail of breadcrumbs again, leading deeper. Each rib, femur, or fragment of skull told a story that had no language, only fear. At 34.9 meters, his dive watch began to malfunction. The numbers scrambled, then froze. He felt the pressure intensify, not just physical, but mental, like something squeezing thought itself. And then came the whisper. Not from outside. From inside his mask. "We remember you." He spun in place, heart pounding. There was no one. Just the sea and the door ahead. The metal had changed. Where before it was sealed and ancient-looking, now there was a slit just wide enough for a human body. And in the soft glow of his light, he saw drag marks in the sand. As if something or someone had been pulled inside. Ellis reached for his GoPro and hit record. If he was going to vanish, he wanted a trace left behind. Then he swam through. The inside was darker than anything he had ever known. Light didn't bend here. It evaporated. He floated in a void that should have terrified him, but instead he felt calm. As if lulled into something unnatural. Then slowly, details began to emerge. Walls curved and slick. Symbols moving faintly like they were breathing. A hallway that wasn't made of stone or metal, but something in between. Living and dead. Ancient and forming. And then he saw her. Mia. Or what was left of her. She stood or floated on the other side of the chamber, hair drifting like seaweed, eyes wide open but unseeing. Her skin was translucent in places, glowing faintly, pulsing like jellyfish. But it was her. Same face. Same features. "Mia?" Ellis whispered. She turned slowly. Her mouth opened. No sound came out, but his ears filled with her voice. "Help Daniel. Please. He's deeper." Then she vanished. Not swam. Not moved. Just blinked out of existence. Like a flame in water. Ellis screamed. Bubbles flooding around his mask. He spun wildly, disoriented, panicking. And that's when the shape appeared. Not a person. Not a fish. Something tall. Lanky. Pale as bone. Its head twisted sideways like it had learned human movement but gotten it wrong. Its fingers were too long, too slow. Its face, if it had one, shifted with every second, like it couldn't decide which memory to wear. Ellis backed away, fumbling for the knife at his side. The creature didn't chase. Pointed. To a tunnel. A deeper one. then vanished into the shadows. Ellis kicked backward, fleeing, pushing up through the same slit in the door, lungs burning with adrenaline. When he breached the surface, the sky had changed. It was dusk. He had only been gone 20 minutes, but the day was nearly gone. He collapsed into the boat, gasping, shivering, trying to speak. Ronan pulled him up. "What did you see?" Ellis coughed violently, then stared at them both, eyes wild. "Mia's alive, kind of. She's trapped," said Daniels deeper. "There's a tunnel. A thing guarding it." Callie's face paled. "A tunnel? Where does it go?" Ellis shook his head. "I don't know. But she begged me. Said to help him. And when she spoke, it wasn't out loud. It was in my head." Ronan pulled out his notebook. "What else?" Ellis stared at the reef. There was something else down there. A symbol. I couldn't read it, but I felt it. Like it was waiting. It knows our names. That night, the footage from the GoPro was reviewed. Most of it was corrupted. Static, white noise, blurred images. But one frame, one clear shot remained. A face. Floating in the dark. Not Mia's. Daniel's. His mouth was open, eyes wide with terror, hands reaching out. And behind him, the same symbol carved into the bone. Over and over. Endless. Surrounding him like a net. Callie stared at the screen. "He's still down there." Ronan nodded. "And if we don't go after him, the sea won't stop with just them." Outside, the tide rose again. Higher than it had in decades. And in the deep, something shifted, sensing that the next chapter had begun. The ring was back on Ronan's desk, glinting under the lamp's pale glow like it hadn't spent half a decade trapped in salt, bone, and darkness. He turned it slowly between gloved fingers, studying the fine etching again. Still, always. The engraving was clean, but around the inside band, just beneath the surface, something shimmered faintly, too faint for the naked eye. It hadn't been visible before, not even under standard UV. But after Ellis's dive, Callie had suggested running a hyperspectral scan. The results came back this morning. Microscopic etching. Symbols. Tiny, interwoven like a circuit, engraved in a spiral beneath the original message. They weren't letters, not in any known language, but some resembled patterns seen in coral growths or sonar interference maps. One symbol kept repeating. A vertical eye with 3 points above it. The same shape Ellis saw deep in the tunnel. The same symbol scorched into the wall behind Daniel's face in the corrupted GoPro frame. "It's like they used this ring to mark her," Callie said quietly. Ronan nodded. "Or she used it to send us a message." She frowned. "You think Mia did this?" He set the ring down. She had time. 5 years. If she was trapped, whatever she is now, she might have found a way to send something back. She carved inside titanium without tools? Ronan looked at her. "We've seen worse." The lab couldn't identify the metal composition anymore. The saltwater had altered it somehow. It no longer registered as pure titanium. It was denser, reactive to magnetic fields. When placed near a compass, it made the needle spin in tight, pulsing circles. There was something else too. Inside the ring's hollow curve, embedded so deep it had to be drilled during manufacture, was a grain of something organic. A tiny shard of bone. DNA matched it to Daniel. Which made no sense. He gave Mia the ring. Not the other way around. And the jeweler who crafted it had died 2 years ago, never leaving any records of unusual requests. How does Daniel's bone get inside her ring before they even vanish? Callie whispered. "Either it's not his bone," Ronan said slowly, "or it is, and time down there doesn't move the way it does up here." Callie stepped away from the desk. "This thing we're chasing, it's not just a creature or a current. It's something else. Something that plays with time. With memory. With people. We knew that when Ella saw Mia. But that means Daniel's been down there 5 years from our perspective. What's that mean for him? What's 5 years of being trapped in a dimension that's always listening?" Ronan didn't have an answer. That afternoon, they drove back to the beach house, needing to return to the place where the timeline had first broken. The house looked different in daylight now, smaller, more vulnerable. The porch sagged worse than before. The windows were all cracked. But the door was locked. Ronan didn't remember ever locking it. He pushed it open. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside, the air felt sharp, colder than it should be. Callie moved to the kitchen, glancing down at the counter. Mia's sketchbook had been moved. Just slightly. Not opened. Not drawn in. Just nudged. Like someone had brushed against it recently. On the floor, under the table, lay a key. Small. Brass. With no label. "Ever seen this before?" she asked. No. That wasn't in any of the reports. They searched the rest of the house, careful not to disturb the scene. In the bedroom, Ronan opened the old closet again. The photo of the beach with the tall shadows was gone. In its place was another photo. Fresh. Glossy. Sitting against the back panel like it had been slid there gently. It showed the inside of the underwater tunnel. Ellis's flashlight beam caught in the frame. But in the foreground, blurred and shrouded, was a silhouette. A figure. Crouched. Watching. Ronan turned it over. On the back was one word. Written in salt. Closer. They didn't speak the whole ride back. When they arrived at their makeshift command post, an old boathouse retrofitted with equipment, they found Ellis waiting, surrounded by sonar maps, pressure charts, and printouts of distorted audio recordings from previous dives. There's more, he said, eyes wide and sleepless. I ran sonar near the reef again last night. There's a shape below the trench. Deeper than I went. It's massive. Not stone. Not wreckage. Something breathing. Breathing? Ronan echoed. Ellis nodded. It pulses every 92 seconds. Like a heartbeat. I can feel it through the water. I think it's alive. Or it's housing something alive. He pointed at the screen. A 3D sonar rendering rotated slowly. Deep beneath Devil's Collar, in a cavern beyond the trench, lay something oval, cocooned in rock. Veined. Rippling slightly. Callie stared. You think Daniel's inside that? Ellis looked at them both. I don't know what I think anymore. But I'm going back in. Not alone, Ronan said. This time, we're all going. Callie hesitated. We don't know what it'll do to us. It's already started, Ronan replied. The photos. The ring. The door. Mia. If we don't finish this, it's going to spread. That night, while prepping their gear, Ronan examined the ring one last time. Under black light, a new etching had appeared. Fresh. Impossible. This time, it was a sentence. Memory belongs to the sea. And below it, faint and rushed, like someone had scratched it in desperation, two final words. Help him. Ronan closed the case and packed it carefully into a waterproof satchel. He didn't know if they'd come back. Didn't know what the sea would demand this time. But he knew one thing. Daniel was still down there. And the sea had not finished telling its story. The investigation had always focused on Mia and Daniel, the engaged couple who vanished without a trace. But as the puzzle widened and twisted into something darker than anyone expected, Callie couldn't shake one thread that had never been properly pulled, the third name. Dorian C. The mysterious man who signed the logbook at a beachfront cabin 2 days before they disappeared, then vanished without a trace the morning after. No ID. No follow-up. Just gone. Back then, it felt like a dead end. Now, it felt like a door they never tried to open. She returned to the cabin records herself, breaking into the storage archives at Driftwood Hollow's dusty municipal building. The logbook had been digitized recently, but the original, weathered, yellowed, nearly crumbling, held something the scanned version didn't. A fingerprint. Faint. Smudged but visible under powder and light. She photographed it and uploaded it to a federal cross-reference database. It hit within an hour. Name, Dorian Calder. Status, deceased. Death recorded, April 17, 1983. Cause, accidental drowning. Location. Devil's Collar Reef. The screen seemed to freeze in front of her. Died in 1983, she whispered, but signed a cabin rental in 2020. She didn't speak a word as she drove back toward the shoreline, mind spinning. Ronan and Ellis were prepping for the next dive, but this was something bigger. Either the fingerprint scan was wrong, or someone had faked an entire identity. Or someone had come back. When she reached the docks, she pulled Ronan aside. We found him. Ronan frowned. Who? Dorian. He died in 1983. Same reef. Same spot. They said he drowned and his body was never recovered. Ronan's voice dropped low. But he signed in under that name 5 years ago. Callie nodded. Which means either someone stole his identity, unlikely because the fingerprint matches, or something from that place wears names. Faces. It brought him back to the surface looking alive. Ellis had heard everything. I don't think it's copying them, he said. I think it's borrowing. Like a memory. Like someone rewinding a recording. You ever replay an old voicemail just to hear the voice of someone who's gone? Callie stared. You're saying it stores people. I'm saying it remembers them. Ronan looked back at the water. Mia. Daniel. Dorian. They're not gone. They're archived. That evening, Callie received a message from an encrypted account. No sender. No signature. Just a text-only file. It read, You're close. Look in the tide journals. The night they vanished wasn't a normal cycle. She pulled the record's historical tide data from coastal research centers. On the night Mia and Daniel vanished, the sea had a rogue tide. Not just higher than usual, but reversed. Water had pulled out toward the reef for hours, then returned too fast, without wind or seismic activity to explain it. The sea emptied itself that night, she whispered. It opened. The three of them gathered in the boathouse as night fell. Ellis loaded sonar equipment while Ronan checked deep-sea suits reinforced for trench pressure. This time, they weren't diving blindly. Callie brought the ring, the photos, the fingerprint result, and one final piece, Dorian Calder's old obituary. No next of kin. No autopsy. Just a brief line about how the sea never gave him back. Until it did, Ronan muttered. They boarded the boat. It was silent but for the hum of the motor and the occasional squawk of distant gulls. The reef waited like an old wound. They dropped anchor just above the deep trench beyond Devil's Collar. This is it, Ellis said, voice tight. We descend together. No separating. The dive began. Darkness swallowed them fast. Lights pierced through like spears, but visibility dropped with every meter. At 20 meters, everything went still. At 30, the water began to feel thick, not with silt, but with presence. It pressed in from all sides. At 34.9 meters, their lights flickered once, then stabilized. Below them was the trench, and something moving inside it. A soft, rhythmic pulse. Like gills. Like lungs. And a shape. Round. Glowing faintly. The cocoon. As they neared, the pulse grew louder. Not in their ears. In their minds. Then came the whisper again. Another guest arrived that night. Ronan's head turned sharply. Did you hear that? Callie and Ellis nodded. The sea was speaking. They hovered above the cocoon. Then Ellis pointed. Inside the glowing shell was a face. Not Mia. Not Daniel. Dorian Calder. But his mouth moved. And the words came from the reef itself. I remember the tide. I remember the silence. I remember being pulled backward through myself. Callie floated closer. How are you still alive? I'm not, he said. I am memory. I am echo. They keep us because they feed on what we were. Ronan's voice shook. Can we save them? Dorian blinked. Yes. But only one. The sea does not give freely. It trades. A tremor passed through the trench. The lights dimmed. The sea began to hum. The one who goes forward does not come back. Then the cocoon split. Inside, another figure. Daniel. Sleeping. Curled like a child. And beside him, Mia. Eyes open. Weeping soundlessly. The choice had to be made. Daniel couldn't tell if it had truly been 5 years. The doctors showed him news articles, calendars, the face of his aging mother who wept uncontrollably when she saw him, but in his mind, it had been days. Maybe weeks. The dream, as he now called it, stretched in fragments across his memory. Not like time ticking, but like a sequence of images held underwater, blurred, distorted, impossible to separate from each other. He remembered the beach, the sound of waves swallowing their footsteps. Mia laughing just ahead of him, running barefoot toward the water with her arms out. He had followed her, of course. He always did. Then the tide pulled backward with impossible force. He remembered grabbing her hand, both of them shouting, stumbling into the waves as if the ocean had opened its throat and swallowed them whole. There was no flailing, no screaming, just the cold wrap of silence and the dim blue light that seemed to whisper into their bones. Mia had looked at him then, not afraid, not panicked, just calm, as though she knew this was how it had to be. And then came the dream, a place of shifting walls and long halls that pulsed like they were alive, doors that opened with thought, shadows that wore faces from his past, teachers, friends, his childhood dog, all flickering in and out like projections in an aquarium. But always Mia was there, holding him, singing, her voice the anchor that kept his mind from dissolving in the endless quiet. Now, lying in a hospital bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to make sense of what was real. Sometimes the fluorescent lights above seemed to ripple. The sound of machines next to his bed echoed too long. He still heard water in his ears when none was there. Callie visited every day. She brought coffee and small questions, gentle ones at first, then deeper ones. She'd slide photographs across the table. Of the cocoon. Of the reef. Of the ring. Of Dorian Calder. Each time, Daniel would pause and try to peel the images back in his memory. I saw Dorian, he said one afternoon. He was already part of it. Not alive. Not dead. He helped us find shelter. Shelter? Callie asked. In the reef. There are chambers. They're built like memories. Yours, not theirs. The sea builds them from what it finds inside you. Callie's hands trembled slightly. You think the sea is alive? Daniel looked at her, solemn. Not like we are. It's not a thing. It's a place. And the place remembers. The doctors cleared Daniel for discharge 2 weeks later. He didn't return to the world with ease. Lights felt too bright. Movement too fast. He often woke in the middle of the night gasping for air, convinced he was still beneath the waves. He carried Mia's ring with him everywhere, even though it burned cold in his palm. He could no longer wear it. It wasn't meant for this world anymore. He visited the beach once. Alone. The sand crunched beneath his shoes like it always had, but the sea felt different now. Like a living wall. He stared at it for an hour, waiting. Hoping. But she didn't come. Back in Driftwood Hollow, Ronan closed the case. Not publicly. Officially, Mia and Daniel had been victims of a powerful rogue current. She was presumed drowned. His survival was labeled a miracle. No mention of symbols, whispering voices, or doorways to impossible places. The world wouldn't understand. The world wasn't ready to understand. But that didn't mean they stopped watching. Ellis stopped diving completely. He sold his equipment, deleted his YouTube channel, and moved inland. The ocean took something from me, he said. I'm not giving it anything else. He kept one thing though, a printout of the sonar scan showing the glowing cocoon and the silhouette of the thing beneath it. He'd stare at it sometimes, wondering if it had a name. Callie stayed. She returned to her work. They floated in a silence so deep it felt like the ocean itself was holding its breath. The cocoon had cracked open like the shell of some ancient creature, releasing a faint blue shimmer that pulsed out through the trench like sonar, a signal older than language. Inside, 2 figures. Daniel, unconscious, his skin pale but unaged, his limbs folded as though he'd only just fallen asleep. And Mia awake, if what she was now could still be called alive. She stared up at them, unmoving. Her eyes glowed faintly with the same light that lined the walls of the trench. Her mouth didn't move, but they all heard her voice, as clear and soft as a thought. It only allows one. The other must stay. Or we all disappear. Callie froze. Who decides? You do, Mia whispered. You've come this far. But every question has a price. Ronan looked at Daniel's body. He's breathing. Barely, Mia said. Time here is thinner. He's 5 years lost in your world, but only days here. If he wakes without passing through the surface, he'll fracture. Fracture. Ellis echoed. Memory collapse. His mind won't recognize what he's returned to. He'll forget who he is. Or worse, he'll remember too much. The cocoon pulsed again. Ronan's gear buzzed with static. Their lights dimmed and flickered. The presence in the trench stirred, something massive and slow, a shape in the water that never fully formed, like it was made of shadow and memory, swimming through layers of forgotten names. Ronan touched Mia's hand. Cold. Not human cold, deeper. The cold of time itself. She smiled faintly, not blinking. Mia, he said, if we bring you up, can you come back? I'm already part of it, she answered. But Daniel still has a path. He still dreams of sunlight. Ellis glanced at the cocoon walls. If we only take one, what happens to the other? The sea keeps them. The reef folds their memory into itself. I won't suffer. I'll remember. Callie floated closer to her. You don't have to be brave for us. Mia smiled again, wider now. This place doesn't take the cowardly. Only those who mean it. I stayed for him. I kept him warm. Now it's your turn. Suddenly the trench shook. The shape beneath them reared, unseen but felt like gravity twisting. Ronan's dive watch cracked. His ears rang. The sea began to whisper louder, chaotic now, multiple voices overlapping, crying out, pleading, screaming. Choose, the sea commanded. Daniel stirred. Just a twitch. His hand shifted, fingers curling slightly. His lips parted. Mia, he mumbled. That broke something in Ronan. He turned to the others. We take him. He still belongs to the surface. Callie didn't argue. Her hand trembled, but she nodded. Ellis reached forward carefully and wrapped Daniel's arm over his shoulder. As they began to ascend, Mia floated backward, arms open, letting the current pull her toward the trench walls. The door of the cocoon began to seal again, glowing brighter, as if sensing the completion of the trade. Mia's final words echoed around them like a hymn. Tell my mother I danced. Tell her I wasn't afraid. And then she was gone. They broke the surface 18 minutes later, gasping under a full moon. The sea had gone still again, eerily flat. No wind. No noise. Ronan heaved Daniel's body onto the deck. Callie checked his pulse. He's alive, she said. But weak. We need to get him to a hospital. Daniel didn't wake on the ride in. Not during the ambulance transfer. Not through the CT scans or when the doctors whispered in corners about impossible metabolic readings and deep-sea oxygen deprivation that should have killed him. But he breathed. He dreamt. 3 days passed. On the fourth morning, Ronan sat beside his bed in a small hospital room lined with silence. Daniel's eyes opened slowly. He looked around, confused, blinking at the light. Then his eyes met Ronan's. "I was underwater," he said hoarsely. "She was with me." Ronan nodded. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "She kept singing to me. Over and over. That old song. The one from the lake trip." Ronan's breath caught. "You remember?" Daniel looked at his hands. "I remember everything." Kelly entered the room slowly, a folder in her hand. We traced the symbol, the eye with the 3 marks. A linguist matched it to an ancient Phoenician variant. "It means memory. In some contexts, it also means debt." Daniel nodded softly. "That fits." Kelly sat beside them. "The place where we found you, it wasn't just a trench. It was a vessel. Like a vault for lost people." He nodded again. "It's still there. Watching. But it's satisfied. For now." Later that night, as Ronan packed up the last of their notes, he opened the case containing Mia's ring one last time. The hidden message beneath the engraving had changed again. It now read, "One returned. One remembered. The sea is patient." Outside, the ocean lapped gently against the shore, calm as ever. But far beneath the waves, something ancient stirred once more, content, for now, with what it had been given. Daniel couldn't tell if it had truly been 5 years. The doctors showed him news articles, calendars, the face of his aging mother who wept uncontrollably when she saw him, but in his mind, it had been days. Maybe weeks. The dream, as he now called it, stretched in fragments across his memory. Not like time ticking, but like a sequence of images held underwater, blurred, distorted, impossible to separate from each other. He remembered the beach, the sound of waves swallowing their footsteps. Mia laughing just ahead of him, running barefoot toward the water with her arms out. He had followed her, of course. He always did. Then the tide pulled backward with impossible force. He remembered grabbing her hand, both of them shouting, stumbling into the waves as if the ocean had opened its throat and swallowed them whole. There was no flailing, no screaming, just the cold wrap of silence and the dim blue light that seemed to whisper into their bones. Mia had looked at him then, not afraid, not panicked, just calm, as though she knew this was how it had to be. And then came the dream, a place of shifting walls and long halls that pulsed like they were alive, doors that opened with thought, shadows that wore faces from his past, teachers, friends, his childhood dog, all flickering in and out like projections in an aquarium. But always Mia was there, holding him, singing, her voice the anchor that kept his mind from dissolving in the endless quiet. Now, lying in a hospital bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to make sense of what was real. Sometimes the fluorescent lights above seemed to ripple. The sound of machines next to his bed echoed too long. He still heard water in his ears when none was there. Callie visited every day. She brought coffee and small questions, gentle ones at first, then deeper ones. She'd slide photographs across the table, of the cocoon, of the reef, of the ring, of Dorian Calder. Each time, Daniel would pause and try to peel the images back in his memory. "I saw Dorian," he said one afternoon. "He was already part of it. Not alive. Not dead. He helped us find shelter." "Shelter?" Callie asked. "In the reef. There are chambers. They're built like memories. Yours, not theirs. The sea builds them from what it finds inside you." Callie's hands trembled slightly. "You think the sea is alive?" Daniel looked at her solemn. "Not like we are. It's not a thing. It's a place." And the place remembers. The doctors cleared Daniel for discharge 2 weeks later. He didn't return to the world with ease. Lights felt too bright. Movement too fast. He often woke in the middle of the night gasping for air, convinced he was still beneath the waves. He carried Mia's ring with him everywhere, even though it burned cold in his palm. He could no longer wear it. It wasn't meant for this world anymore. He visited the beach once. Alone. The sand crunched beneath his shoes like it always had, but the sea felt different now. Like a living wall. He stared at it for an hour, waiting. Hoping. But she didn't come. Back in Driftwood Hollow, Ronan closed the case. Not publicly. Officially, Mia and Daniel had been victims of a powerful rogue current. She was presumed drowned. His survival was labeled a miracle. No mention of symbols, whispering voices, or doorways to impossible places. The world wouldn't understand. The world wasn't ready to understand. But that didn't mean they stopped watching. Ellis stopped diving completely. He sold his equipment, deleted his YouTube channel, and moved inland. The ocean took something from me, he said. I'm not giving it anything else. He kept one thing though, a printout of the sonar scan showing the glowing cocoon and the silhouette of the thing beneath it. He'd stare at it sometimes, wondering if it had a name. Callie stayed. She returned to her work but requested coastal cases only. The reef haunted her in quiet moments. Sometimes in her dreams she heard music playing underwater. Two soft notes repeating. Mia's lullaby. Ronan kept the ring in a locked drawer. He'd open it occasionally, especially when the tide did strange things or when locals whispered about lights in the water. The ring never changed again. The last message remained etched beneath the words still, always. The sea is patient. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Ronan received a package with no return address. Inside, wrapped in soaked linen, was a single photograph. Daniel standing alone on the beach, holding a shell to his ear, eyes closed. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "She still sings." That night, Ronan stood by the shore himself, staring out into the endless dark blue. He couldn't help but wonder how many others the sea had taken. How many walked the halls of memory down there? How many were waiting to be remembered? And then, just as he turned to leave, a small wave lapped up the sand and left something behind. A shell. Perfect. Intact. When he lifted it to his ear, he didn't hear the ocean. He heard a girl's voice humming softly. In Driftwood Hollow, the townspeople had learned long ago that the ocean had moods. They talked about the sea like it was a relative, sometimes generous, sometimes cruel, always watching. But there were things they didn't say out loud, not even among themselves. Superstitions wrapped in silence. Old stories half told and then buried. Callie knew that if they were going to understand what had truly happened to Mia and Daniel, what the ocean really was, she'd have to dig through whispers. She started with Mavie Harper, the oldest living resident in town. 93, nearly blind, but sharp as rusted nails. Callie found her rocking slowly on the front porch of a lopsided white house that overlooked the sea. The view from her chair, she claimed, never changed. The ocean always looked the same, but that was the trick. It doesn't look different, Mavie said, because it is different. Every tide pulls something else up and takes something else away. Callie pulled up a chair, no small talk. What happened in 1983? A man named Dorian Calder drowned out at Devil's Collar. But I don't think the ocean kept him. Mavie's hands stopped rocking. Her breath caught for half a second. That was the tell. Dorian went looking, she said at last. Just like they always do. He was a digger. Always thought the ocean hid treasure. He used to say the sea floor was full of things people weren't meant to find. I warned him. But Dorian, he found something, all right. And it followed him back. Callie leaned in. What do you mean? Mavie turned her head slightly, eyes milky but piercing. He came home wet. But it hadn't rained. Sat on that porch and stared at the sea for 3 days. Didn't sleep. Didn't eat. On the 4th day, he walked back into the water. Clothes and all. Never seen again. Callie swallowed hard. He signed a cabin ledger in 2020. We have a fingerprint. It matched. Mavie nodded slowly, not surprised. It remembers. That place. That trench. It borrows faces. Not ghosts, not quite. Echoes. If it liked you enough to keep a piece, it can wear you when it wants. Callie asked what she meant by it. Mavie simply said the hollow. That's what we used to call it. Driftwood Hollow wasn't named for the trees. It was for the people. People who were hollowed out after the sea took them. The next day, Callie visited the town's tiny historical society. The place was mostly dusty fishing records and framed black and white photos of long-gone boats. But in the back room, buried under water-damaged journals, she found a map. Hand-drawn. Ink faded. The reef was marked, but there was a circle around it, ink darker than the rest, red, and next to it someone had written just one word. Mouth? Not trench, not reef. Mouth? She photographed the map and took it to Ronan. It's not just a location, she said. It's an entry. A feeding point. The ocean doesn't just take. It digests. Ronan nodded, silent. The photo Daniel had sent, the one of him holding the shell, still sat on his desk. He'd listened to it again. The hum was growing clearer. Less like music, more like speech. Repeating. He ran it through audio processing software. The waveform wasn't random. It repeated every 31 seconds, always ending on a dip. Like Morse code. Only it wasn't a message in dots and dashes. It was an invitation. And something else. A warning. The waveform pattern matched another file, a transmission recorded by the Navy in 1991 near Devil's Collar and sealed under Project Bellows. That was the moment Ronan realized Mia hadn't just sung a lullaby into the shell. She had encoded a direction. Ellis returned to town after Callie called him. He'd sworn off the sea, but when she explained what they'd found, he agreed to one more meeting. He brought with him the last sonar map they'd taken before the final dive and overlays showing the trench structure shifting in real time. One chamber had moved. Chambers don't move, he said. Stone doesn't move. But this place, the reef walls are folding in on themselves like a lung. Callie placed the photo of the map beside the sonar. The outlines matched. The chamber marked mouth on the old map was the same chamber that was now closed off in the sonar image. Something had fed. Daniel remained quiet. He had not spoken of Mia since waking. Not in detail. But that morning he left a note on Callie's porch. It remembers her. That means she's still part of it. But it also means she's not done. He included a sketch. A crude drawing of the reef, a circle in the center, and a tunnel running below it into the dark. At the bottom was the same I symbol etched into Mia's bone. Ronan stared at the drawing. He didn't remember that from his dream. That's not from memory. That's from now. The town started to change. People stopped walking near the shore. Fishermen docked their boats 2 towns away. Rumors spread of waves that didn't crest, of children hearing lullabies in the foam, of shadows in the water that had no swimmer. A church bell rang at the wrong hour. Dogs barked at high tide. Callie stood on the rocks one evening, watching the sun drop behind the edge of the sea. The waves below moved slower than normal, like the ocean was listening again. She thought about what Mavie had said. The sea never forgets who feeds it. And in the distance, just beyond the reach of human hearing, the sea whispered a name. Mia. The sky was black by the time they reached the water, darker than it had ever looked. No moon. No stars. Just an ocean like obsidian glass stretching endlessly ahead. The air was still. Not peaceful, silent, as if nature itself had turned away. Not even the seagulls cried anymore. Callie stood at the edge of the dock beside Ronan and Ellis, the 3 of them suited up again, not just with diving gear but with everything they'd gathered over 5 long years of not knowing. Maps. Symbols. Fragments. The ring. Daniel's drawing. Mia's voice still whispering faintly through the shell. It had been 3 days since Driftwood Hollow fell quiet. Fishermen stayed inland. The diner closed without explanation. Even Mavie's porch sat empty now, her rocking chair swaying by itself in a wind that didn't move the trees. Something had shifted beneath the reef. And if they didn't act now, it would breach. Ronan handed Callie the old sonar scanner. Track the tunnel. If it's collapsed, we find the next passage. Ellis adjusted his mask. Lips tight. We're not diving for rescue anymore. We're diving to end this. The descent began just after 10 p.m. At 20 meters, the water pressed against them like a wall. The reef's glow began earlier this time, as if it knew they were coming. At 30, the first shadow passed above them. Fast. Massive. Gone. At 40, the lights on their suits flickered, then returned. And then the tunnel appeared, its entrance twisted now, as if grown rather than built, like the reef itself had pulled the walls tight around it. They passed through. Inside, the architecture was no longer recognizable. Not stone. Not coral. Something between bone and glass. The walls shimmered like muscle under stress. Strange pulses echoed through the water. Not sound, but pressure. Language not spoken but felt. The trench had grown teeth. Hold formation, Ronan said through the comms. No one splits off. But already they felt it, memories warping. Callie saw her father, long dead, standing on the ocean floor. Ellis saw the girl he lost to a diving accident when he was 19. Ronan saw the child he never told anyone about. They blinked. The images were gone. Keep moving, Ronan ordered. It's trying to feed again. The hallway opened into a wide chamber. The mouth, just like the old map had shown. And in the center was a new cocoon. Not the one Daniel had been found in. This one pulsed violently, its membrane cracked and oozing light. Inside something moved. Callie reached forward, touching the outside surface. The light responded, flaring to show a shape, curled, fragile. Mia, but not asleep. Her eyes opened instantly. She looked directly at Callie, into her, and spoke. You shouldn't have come. Her voice filled all of them, not through sound, but through every cell in their bodies. The pressure increased. The reef groaned. Ronan pointed his scanner at the walls. They're collapsing in a spiral. This place is imploding. Mia floated upward inside the cocoon. She placed her hand against the shell. You don't understand. It's not just me. It's awake now. You made it remember more. Then let us help you out, Callie said aloud, mask trembling against her lips. Mia shook her head slowly. If I leave, it follows. You brought back Daniel, but you didn't close the door. It's still open. And it's hungry. Behind them, the trench rumbled. The sound was deep and wet and alive. Then something began rising from below. A shape so large it bent the water around it. Like a creature wearing 1,000 memories. Faces floated in and out of its form: Dorian, Mia's mother, Ellis's lost diver. The thing spoke in hundreds of voices, echoing all at once. One returned. One must remain. Balance. Mia pressed her palm hard against the inside wall of the cocoon. Cracks formed. You have to seal it. Collapse the reef. Cut it off from memory. How? Callie asked, panicked. The ring. It's the key. It holds both ends of the bridge. Ronan unclipped the ring from his pouch, hand trembling. The engraving still glowed faintly. Still, always. Ellis stepped forward, holding up the sonar scanner. If we detonate charges at the tunnel's mouth and place the ring at the focal point, it'll trap the current. Break the fold. Callie stared at Mia, pain thick in her chest. If we do this. Mia nodded. I fade. For good this time. But I'll take it with me. And you all live. Ronan placed the ring in a crevice at the tunnel's mouth, then triggered the scanner's frequency emitter. The reef responded immediately, shaking, flexing, screaming in some language none of them could ever repeat. The cocoon cracked open. Mia floated forward, radiant and dissolving, her body already turning to light. The trench creature screamed. Ellis hit the detonator. A violent quake tore through the reef. The tunnel shattered inward. Water whipped through the passage like a cyclone. Ronan, Callie, and Ellis were thrown backward, spiraling toward the surface. And in the center of it all, Mia drifted down into the mouth. Smiling. Gone. They burst above water under a sky now full of stars. Gasping, bleeding, exhausted. The sea around them was quiet. Too quiet. Ellis looked back toward the reef. It was gone. Collapsed. Erased. No more trench. Just open water. Ronan checked the sonar. No signal. No signature. Nothing left. Callie didn't speak. She just stared at the horizon, tears streaming silently, the shell still clutched in her hand. It was quiet now, for the first time in weeks. No hum. No song. Just silence. The story closed quietly. No news headlines. No documentaries. Driftwood Hollow returned to what it had always been, a sleepy town with its back turned to the sea. The locals whispered less now, as if the story had finally ended. But sometimes, when the tide's just right, a single wave rolls up the sand and leaves behind a perfect white shell. And if you lift it to your ear, you might still hear the faint echo of a woman's voice, humming the end of a lullaby. Still, always.